The 53rd floor of Halcyon Wealth Partners had a view that made people forget their own names. Floor-to-ceiling glass on three sides, the Chicago skyline bleeding gold and gray in the early morning light, Lake Michigan flat and silver in the distance, like a poured sheet of steel. It was the kind of office that existed to remind you of the distance between people who belonged there and people who merely worked there. Nora Calloway belonged to the second category. She had worked that out for herself on her first day 3 years ago, when she'd walked out of the elevator with her forensic accounting certification still warm from the printer, and Daphne Hartwell had looked her up and down once, just once, and turned back to her conversation without a word. Nora was 28. She was soft where the women on the 53rd floor were angular, round where they were flat, quiet, where they were loud in the precise calibrated way that powerful people are loud. She wore cardigans she bought in the plus section of a store that didn't put plus in the name, because she'd learned early that small dignities matter when large ones are routinely withheld. Her hair was dark and thick, and she kept it twisted up because once, during her first month, a senior associate named Tiffany Wren had laughed and said her curls made her look like she'd come in from the rain. She hadn't said anything back. She'd gone to the bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror for exactly 4 seconds, and then gone back to her desk and found a discrepancy in the Belmore account that saved the firm $2.3 million. Richard Alderman, the managing partner, had sent her a gift card to a restaurant she'd never been to. He'd signed it with his initials. That was the kind of gratitude the 53rd floor offered. The morning that changed everything started like every other morning. Nora had her coffee from the cart downstairs, not the artisan place on the corner that everyone else used, because the barista there had once asked her, loudly, if she was sure she wanted the whole milk. And she took the back elevator because the front one was always crowded with people from the executive suite who had a talent for making her feel invisible, even while they were staring directly at her. She had just settled at her desk and opened the Fairchild Trust files when the first black SUV pulled up to the building, then the second, then 3 more. Nora noticed because her desk was the one nobody wanted, the one by the window at the far corner that got direct afternoon sun and turned into a greenhouse by 2 o'clock. In winter it was the only warm spot on the floor, but nobody gave you credit for that. What it also offered was a clean sightline down to the street, and 5 black SUVs arriving in formation on a Tuesday morning at 7:43 was not the kind of thing a forensic accountant trained to notice anomalies could ignore. She looked at the plates on her second coffee. The plates were clean, too clean, no dealer frames, no registration stickers in the corner. Government plates had a particular quality, a particular blandness. These weren't government plates. These were something else entirely, something that said we don't need to be identified, because she had the Fairchild files open. She also, almost without thinking about it, pulled up the building's publicly available tenant registry, Halcyon Wealth Partners, Corwin Legal Group, 3 private equity boutiques whose names she'd never bothered to memorize, and on the 31st floor, a listed entity called Voss Capital Holdings LLC, with no website, no listed principals, and a registered address that, when she'd looked it up 18 months ago out of pure habit, traced back to a shell in Delaware, that traced back to another shell in the Caymans, that traced back to nothing at all. She had flagged it in her personal notes. She had not flagged it anywhere official because she had learned, slowly, expensively, in the currency of being overlooked for promotions, that people on the 53rd floor did not like it when Nora Calloway noticed things they hadn't asked her to notice. She closed the tab. She went back to Fairchild. At 8:15, Richard Alderman walked past her desk without looking at her and said, "Into the middle distance. Calloway. Conference room C now." Conference room C was the small one they used when they didn't want to imply importance. Nora had been in conference room C 11 times in 3 years. 9 of those times had involved being told, in various elegant phrasings, that her work was excellent, but that she should perhaps be less visible about the way she arrived at her conclusions. She walked in and stopped. Richard Alderman stood at the head of the table. Beside him stood Daphne Hartwell, and beside Daphne stood a man Nora had never seen before. He was the kind of man rooms adjusted themselves for. He was tall and dark-haired, somewhere in his mid-30s, with a kind of stillness that doesn't come from calm, but from a long practice of deciding how much of yourself you're willing to let other people see. He wore a suit that cost more than Nora's car. His eyes, when they found her in the doorway, were the particular grey of Lake Michigan in November. Not cold exactly, but not warm either. Evaluating. Already calculating something she wasn't aware she was offering. "Close the door," Richard said. Nora closed it. "This is Mr. Voss," Richard said. "He has a situation that requires our best forensic specialist." Nora looked at Richard. Then she looked at Daphne, who was examining her nails with the focused attention of someone who had been told to be in this room and was expressing her feelings about that wordlessly. Then she looked back at the man called Voss. "Nora Calloway," she said. "Senior forensic analyst." "I know who you are," Voss said. His voice was low and even, and he did not offer his hand. "I've read your work. We don't publish our internal analyses." Something shifted in his expression. It wasn't a smile exactly, it was the ghost of an acknowledgement. "No," he said. "You don't." Richard cleared his throat. "Mr. Voss has retained our firm for a sensitive matter involving the Strathmore Group, specifically a suspected internal diversion that has been moving funds through a set of nested accounts with a structure that has so far resisted our in-house team's efforts to untangle." Nora kept her face neutral. She knew the Strathmore Group. Anyone who worked in forensic accounting in Chicago knew the Strathmore Group the way meteorologists knew particular storm systems, by reputation, by the particular shape of the damage they left, by the fact that nobody had ever successfully audited them and come out the other side professionally intact. "I'll need full access," she said. "Every transaction record, every correspondent account, every beneficial ownership disclosure they've ever filed, even if the disclosures are fraudulent. Especially if they're fraudulent." Richard blinked. This was not how he had expected this conversation to go. Voss looked at her for a moment that lasted approximately 1 second longer than necessary. "Done," he said. What nobody told her in Conference Room C was the rest of it. What nobody told her was that Voss Capital Holdings LLC was not a private equity firm. Or rather, it was a private equity firm the way a city is a collection of buildings. Technically accurate and profoundly incomplete. Lucian Voss, and that was his name. She found it in a court filing from 8 years ago that had been sealed and then unsealed and then quietly buried, was the operating head of what the FBI's Organized Crime Division had, in an internal memo that had been leaked and then retracted, called the most sophisticated financial infrastructure in the Midwest underworld. She found all of this out on Wednesday. She had been assigned to the case on Tuesday. She found it out because finding things out was what she did, and she did it the same way she did everything, methodically, thoroughly, and without telling anyone what she was doing until she was certain. She sat with it for a full hour, then she went back to the files. Because here was the other thing. Whoever had structured the Strathmore diversion was genuinely brilliant. She had been doing forensic accounting for 6 years, and she had never seen nested accounts layered with this particular elegance, this almost architectural precision. It was beautiful in the way that very terrible things are sometimes beautiful, the way a hurricane looks from space, the way a fault line looks on a map. Somebody had built this to be invisible, and it almost was. Almost. She found the first thread on Thursday morning. It was a rounding discrepancy in a correspondent account held by a bank in Geneva, so small that 3 of the previous analysts had passed over it twice. 0.1% on a transaction of $400,000, $40. An error so tiny it had been dismissed as a floating point issue. It was not a floating point issue. She pulled that thread. By Friday, she had the shape of the whole thing. Lucian Voss came to the office on Friday afternoon. He did not announce himself. He did not need to. The particular quality of the silence that preceded him through the open-plan floor told Nora he was there before she looked up. He stopped at her desk, looked at her screen, looked at her. "You found something," he said. "I found everything," she said. "Sit down or stand, I don't care. But I'm not explaining this twice, so pay attention." Daphne, 2 desks away, went very still. Nora did not look at Daphne. She turned her screen slightly so Voss could see it and walked him through it, the rounding error, the correspondent account, the pattern it revealed when you overlaid it with the transaction timing on the secondary accounts, the shell company in Luxembourg that appeared to be legitimate, until you noticed that its registered agent was the same individual who appeared as a beneficial owner in a Cayman entity that received wire transfers from a numbered account in Singapore on the same day, every quarter. Without exception, for 4 years, Voss did not speak. He watched the screen. He watched her hands on the keyboard. His jaw was set in a particular way that she would later come to recognize as the expression he wore when something had surprised him, and he was deciding whether to let that show. "The total diversion," she said, "is approximately 47 million over the 4 years. The mechanism is a fee-skimming structure embedded inside a legitimate management fee arrangement, so it's been appearing on the books as ordinary operating expense. Whoever designed this knew exactly which line items have the lowest audit frequency." "Who designed it?" he asked. She looked at him. "That's a different kind of question." "Can you answer it?" "I already have," she said. "That's why I said pay attention." She pulled up a second window. Transaction authorization signatures, matched to internal user accounts. A name resolved itself in the data, the same name appearing at every decision point, every authorization, every window in the structure where a human hand had shaped the architecture. Voss looked at the name on the screen for a long time. "That's my head of Treasury operations," he said. "Yes," Nora said. "He's been with me for 11 years. "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Then, very quietly, "How long to document this in a form admissible for civil recovery?" "I've already started the documentation package," she said. "I can have it complete by Monday morning." He turned and looked at her then, fully, in a way he hadn't quite done before, a way that wasn't about the screen, or the data, or the case. It was the look of a person recalibrating something they had decided in advance. "You've been on this case for 4 days," he said. 3.5. "My previous firm had 12 analysts on this for 7 months. I know," she said. "I read their work. They were looking at the wrong accounts." He said nothing for a moment. Then, "Monday morning, Miss Calloway." He left. Daphne exhaled audibly. Nora went back to the documentation. The call came Saturday night. She was at home, in the apartment she'd lived in for 4 years in Pilsen, in the section of Pilsen that had not yet been improved by people with better shoes than hers. She was in her good chair by the window with the Strathmore files on her laptop and a bowl of pasta that was getting cold, and her phone rang from a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. She answered, Miss Calloway." Not a question. His voice, lower on the phone, with a particular texture to it that the acoustics of an office filtered out. "There's been a complication." She set down her fork. "Tell me." "The individual whose name appeared in your analysis is aware that an investigation has been initiated. We believe there has been a leak from within Halcyon." Nora processed this. "From the partner level," she said. It wasn't a question either, a brief pause. "We believe so, Alderman," she said. Another pause. Longer. "I didn't say that. You didn't need to. He was the one who brought me in. If he's the leak, he brought me in either because he didn't think I'd find anything, or because he expected to be able to manage what I found before it went anywhere useful. The fact that he's panicking now means he underestimated the timeline." Voss was quiet on the other end of the line for a moment that felt different from his other silences. Not calculating, but something else. "You should not be at your apartment tonight," he said. Nora looked around her apartment. At the good chair, the cold pasta, the window that looked out onto the street where, now that she was looking, a black SUV was parked that had not been there an hour ago. "I see," she said. I'm sending someone, Mr. Voss. She kept her voice even. I want to be very clear about something before anyone comes through my door. I don't work for you. I was retained by Halcyon, and my obligation is to the integrity of the analysis, not to any party's preferred outcome. If I come with your people tonight, it's because I've concluded it's the rational choice given the circumstances, not because I'm under your protection. I'm not a thing that needs protecting. The silence that followed was the longest one yet. Understood, he said. And then, after a beat, the documentation package. Is it backed up somewhere other than Halcyon's servers? It's in 3 locations, she said. None of them are Halcyon's servers. She heard something on the other end, not quite a sound, more like the absence of the sound a person makes when they're about to say something and decide not to. Monday morning, he said finally. Monday morning, she said. She closed her laptop, saved everything to her encrypted drive, changed into jeans and her good boots, packed a bag with 2 days of clothes and her external drive, and the medication she took for her knee and the book she was in the middle of, and sat by the door. The knock came 11 minutes later. He kept her at a property in Lincoln Park that had a view of the park and a kitchen stocked with food someone had clearly thought about, not just ordered. She did not see Voss that night. She saw a woman named Bia, who said she managed logistics, who showed Nora her room without commentary or condescension, and who brought her a cup of tea without being asked and then left her alone. Nora finished the documentation package at 1 in the morning. She slept. In the morning there was coffee already made and a plate of things, fruit, eggs, a pastry she didn't recognize, and Lucian Voss was sitting at the kitchen table with a phone in his hand, reading something. He looked up when she came in. She was wearing yesterday's jeans and a cardigan she'd packed, and she had not done anything with her hair, which was considerable and loose in the way it got when she didn't manage it. And she had been awake until 1 and looked exactly like a person who had been awake until 1, and she had, in this moment, precisely 0 capacity for performing anything other than the truth of herself. He looked at her. Then he looked back at his phone. Then he set his phone face down on the table. "There's coffee," he said. "I can see that," she said, and poured herself some. She sat across from him with her mug, and he said nothing, and she said nothing. And for approximately 3 minutes this was entirely comfortable, which was the first strange thing she had noticed about him that wasn't threatening. "Alderman confirmed the leak," he said eventually. "My legal team served him this morning. Good. The Treasury operations had attempted to initiate a transfer last night that would have completed the final phase of the diversion. It was flagged by the freeze order we filed based on your documentation." "How much?" 11 million. She wrapped her hands around her mug. "So 47 becomes 36 once recovery is complete. Assuming we can pierce the Luxembourg structure." "You can," she said. "I included the piercing argument in Section 4 of the documentation. The beneficial ownership trail is clean enough for civil recovery, and I've identified the natural person at the end of it. The Luxembourg entity has a weak point in its registered agent arrangement. Any competent international commercial litigation firm will be able to use it." Voss looked at her across the table. "Section 4, he said. "You should read it." "I read it at 3 this morning, he said. "It's the best forensic work I've encountered in 15 years. She looked at him. She was 31 years old, and she had been doing excellent work for 6 years, and she could count on one hand the number of times someone had said something like that to her, directly, without qualifications, without the particular softening that people used when they wanted to acknowledge quality, without fully committing to the acknowledgement. She did not know what her face did. She hoped it did nothing. "Drink your coffee," she said. She did not go back to Halcyon. This was not a dramatic decision. It was a mathematical one. Richard Alderman was going to be served papers within 48 hours. The firm was going to be consumed by its own internal investigation for months. Her work there was finished. Not just the Strathmore case, but her work there as a concept, as a sustained tolerance of a place that had taken everything she offered and given back a gift card and a desk by the window that got too much sun. She called her sister in Phoenix and told her she had left her job. Her sister said finally and asked if she needed money. Nora said no. Her sister said, "Call me if that changes." Nora said, "I will." She wasn't sure that was true, but it felt right to say. She was staying in a hotel by this point. The Lincoln Park property had been temporary, and she had 2 job offers pending from firms she'd applied to 3 months ago, when she'd first started having the particular feeling she associated with the period before she made a decision, the low-grade restlessness that her mother had always called her weather system. She was working through the second offer's terms when her phone rang. Lucien Voss. "The recovery is proceeding," he said without preamble. "The Luxembourg structure was as weak as your analysis suggested." "I know," she said. "I've been following the court filings a beat." "Of course you have. Was there something else?" "There's a position," he said. "I'm restructuring the financial oversight function at Voss Capital. I need someone who is genuinely independent, someone whose loyalty is to accuracy rather than to outcome." Nora was quiet for a moment. "You understand what that means," she said. "An independent forensic function reports to no one except the board. It follows the evidence wherever it goes, including places you might prefer it didn't go." "Yes," he said. "And you're comfortable with that?" "Comfortable is not the word I would choose," he said. "But I've decided I prefer an honest audit to a comfortable one." She looked out the hotel window at the lake, flat and grey in the late afternoon. She thought about 3 years of conference room C. She thought about the gift card. She thought about Tiffany Wren and the rain comment and the 4 seconds she had spent in the bathroom mirror and the $2.3 million that had been returned to a client who never knew her name. "There are conditions," she said. "Name them: direct board reporting line, full document access, no exceptions, no prior review by your operational team, staff of my choosing, not yours, compensation benchmarked to an independent third party, internal bans, because I've seen your internal bans, and they're creative in ways that disadvantage people like me, people like you," he said. "Not a challenge. A question. People who get the desk by the window," she said. "People whose work goes in the filing cabinet while someone else gets the credit and the corner office and the restaurant gift card. People who are brought in when the situation requires capability and shown the door when the situation requires optics." She paused. "I've spent 3 years in that arrangement. I won't spend 3 more. Silence on the line. "Every condition," he said, "is accepted." She held the phone for a moment. "I'll need the board resolution in writing by end of week," she said. "You'll have it by tomorrow." She almost said something. She stopped herself. "One more thing," he said. His voice had a different quality now. Not the operational tone she'd heard all week, but something without the usual layer of management over it. "The position is genuine, but I want to be transparent with you about something that is separate from the position. Go ahead." "I would like to take you to dinner," he said. "Not as your employer, not in any capacity that relates to Voss Capital or Halcyon, or any professional matter whatsoever. I would like to take you to dinner because you are the most interesting person I have met in a considerable number of years, and because I think about the way you talk about rounding errors with what I can only describe as affection, and because you told me to sit or stand at our first meeting, and I have spent most of the week thinking about that." Nora looked at the ceiling of the hotel room. "The board resolution first," she said. "Of course. And I pick the restaurant. I would expect nothing less." She almost smiled. She was fairly certain he would have known, even through the phone, that she almost smiled. She was less certain she minded. The board resolution arrived at 7:42 the following morning. She read every word of it 3 times. It was structurally exactly what she had asked for. The reporting line was unambiguous. The access language was complete. The compensation clause referenced an independent benchmarking methodology that she happened to know produced fair numbers, because she had seen it applied at 2 previous firms. She sent back 3 minor clarifications. The revised version arrived within the hour. She signed it. She sat in the hotel room for a moment with the signed document on her laptop screen and the lake out the window going through its morning colors, gray to blue to something that wasn't quite either. And she thought about the first time she had walked into Halcyon Wealth Partners with her certification still warm from the printer, and how she had not known then what she knew now. Which was that the work itself had always been the point, that the work itself was where she had always lived, that rooms and desks and gift cards and the 45th floor versus the 53rd floor were furniture around a life that was actually structured around something more durable than any of those things. Then she picked up her phone. "The board resolution is executed," she said. "I know," Voss said. "I received the counter-executed copy 6 minutes ago. Then we have a professional arrangement." "We do. And a dinner to schedule." A pause. When he spoke again, there was something in his voice she hadn't heard before, something that sounded, remarkably, like relief. "We do," he said. "I'm thinking Thursday," she said. "Somewhere with a good wine list and unremarkable lighting. I've spent enough of my life in places designed to make certain people feel small." "I know exactly the place," he said. She believed him. She gathered her things and checked out of the hotel and walked out into the Chicago morning with the lake glittering silver at the end of every east-west street, and she did not look back at anything.